I've already been told this evening that I could preach long and hard, get out about 10 o'clock, is what I've been told this evening. So anybody has any problem with that, take it up with my mother-in-law. So, but I know what you're thinking when you see 3 John. You're thinking, wow, that's not even a whole page. There's no way he can get long-winded tonight. Well, as Donna would tell you, I can get long-winded at the drop of a hat. And there's only going to be one verse here in 3 John, and so we're going to be moving around a little bit, so your hope's gone anyway, however you look at it. But we're going to be dealing with a topic tonight. And let's read the text verse for tonight, 3 John and verse 11. Beloved, so he's talking to the church, he's talking to the saved here. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doeth good is of God, but he that doeth evil hath not seen God. We'll read that again. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doeth good is of God, but he that doeth evil hath not seen God. Our message tonight is on evil and how we, the church, are to deal with evil. How we, the church, are to deal with evil. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list. There's basically 4 points tonight. There's no doubt more that can be read and studied from God's Word. But we're going to see tonight in these 4 points how we, the church, are to deal with evil. But before we do, let us define terms. Let us define terms because there's a difference between the evil God does and the evil that we human beings do. Now, some people say, God never does evil. God's Word says differently. Let's take just one example, if you'd turn to the book of Exodus in chapter 32. And we'll look at an example of course, in this case, it did not take place. But we will see that God does do evil. God does commit evil. But it's completely different from the evil you and I would do. And here in chapter 32, for just a little background, Moses is up on the mountain of Sinai. He's just received the 10 Commandments written with the very finger of God. And when we get to, which is the last verse of chapter 31, then when we get to chapter 32, the children of Israel are concerned. Moses has been gone for a while and they don't know where he's at. And they go to Aaron and say, make us gods. And so Aaron does just that. He makes a golden calf. And God starts a conversation with Moses while they're still up on the mountain together. And so let's look at this conversation, starting with verses 10 through 12. Now this is God speaking, now therefore let me alone, that my wrath, and remember wrath means God's violent anger, that my wrath may wax hot, wax means to grow hot, against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. Verse 11, and Moses besought the Lord his God, and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt, with great power and with a mighty hand? Verse 12, wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, for mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from thy fierce wrath, and repent of this what? Evil against thy people. Verses 13 and 14. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Israel is Jacob, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and saidest unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people. God does do evil. You can read other places in the Old Testament where God warns of the evil that he's going to bring. So God does evil. It's just God's evil is a just sentence of destruction. A just sentence of destruction. But for us human beings, as people, the definition is turning aside from God's laws. Turning aside from conduct prescribed or commanded by God. The difference, God's just in the evil He does. It's a just sentence of destruction. Where ours is unjust. It's warring against God. It's disobeying God. It's breaking His commandments and those things that He has prescribed to us. So the question that we've already brought up this evening, how do we, the church of the living God, deal with evil? How do we, the church of the living God, deal with evil? The evil that's in the world, not God's evil, not a just sentence of destruction, but the evil of breaking God's laws, the evil of breaking God's prescribed commands. How do we deal with that? Well, if you'd turn to Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1. And let's see what God has to say about this in verses 1 and verse 8. Job chapter 1. And God gives us our first point tonight in Job. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright. Now, perfect there doesn't mean Job hadn't sinned. It just simply means that Job was a man complete in the ways of God. Just like there's 7 days in a week. And that's a complete week. This is a complete godly man. And one that feared God and eschewed evil. Look at verse 8. Now there's a conversation at this point going on between the Lord and Satan. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man? Boy, wouldn't you love to have God say that about you? A perfect and upright lady, a perfect and upright man. He says that of Job. You know, there are certain things throughout God's Word that it would sure be wonderful for God to be able to say about any of us, like David, a man after God's own heart. Well, here we read, and there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man. And again, this is the Lord speaking. One that feareth God and escheweth evil. Here we're given the first two. How do we deal in an evil world? How do we in the church, this isn't about the lost, this is about the church. How do those of us that's washed in Jesus' most holy and precious blood handle this evil world? The first one is to fear God. To fear God. You know, that sounds very familiar in the same way. Those of you that had godly parents. Those of you that had parents that was brought up in a godly household, you had a godly daddy and a godly mama. You knew they was there when you needed them. They was there to back you up. They was there, if need be, they would get in front of you and take the arrows themselves. But you also knew if you done wrong, they was consequences. And the consequences could get quite severe depending on the wrong that was done. Well, in the same way is with God. And a lot of times the fear of our parents prevented us from doing some of the things we would have done anyway, wouldn't it? I mean, that's the way it was. We knew, you know, at the adult daycare Monday, we was talking and I said something about something was brought up about spanking and discipline of children. Something greatly lacking today. Brother Jake and I could tell you it wasn't lacking in our raising. Now, praise the Lord, for the most part, neither one of us got a lot of spankings, because normally just that look from Daddy was all it took. That look meant whatever was going on, it better stop, and it better stop now. And we knew better than to go on with it. We knew better than to go on with it. Well, in the same way, the fear of God prevents us from getting into trouble, prevents us from getting into the evil that's put out into this world. It's a protection, and a protection from the consequences of that as well. Then we read about feareth God and escheweth evil. That word eschew means to flee from, to avoid. You know, sometimes we have to fight evil. But a lot of times the best fight is to avoid it in the first place. Sometimes the best fight is to flee. What's that old saying? A hasty retreat's better than a bad stand. If you can see the evil approaching afar off, the right thing to do may not always be to run up and meet it. Sometimes it is, but sometimes we need to flee. We need to avoid it. God's given us the vision to see it ahead of time. Escape, avoid, get away from it. When you go back to Genesis and you see Satan talking with Adam and Eve, the biggest mistake that Eve made was carrying on a conversation. Now we can talk about Adam's fault in the situation too. He should have, when he heard Satan say, yea, hath God said, he should have grabbed Eve by the hand and got them out of there. Flee from the evil. Avoid the evil. There's a time to fight and there's a time to flee. And Job was a man that feared God, and he was a man that eschewed evil. He knew to get out of its presence. He knew not to try to stand in front of it, when the smart thing was to flee. Many times we, the church, like to see how close we can get to the line. You know, I was thinking about something that I'd heard preacher Spencer Smith, an evangelist or a missionary preacher, talk about this very thing. We like to see how close we can get to the line without crossing it. You remember when you were little children? Maybe you was playing with brothers or sisters or friends. Somebody took their heel and dug them a line in the sand or in the dirt. Better not cross that. Better not cross that line. And of course, somebody crossed the line and you'd back up, wouldn't you? Another line in the sand. Better not cross that one. And on and on. We like to see how close to the line we can get without going over. That's very unwise. We, the church, shouldn't try to see how close to the line we can get. When we see the line, we should stay as far away from the line as we can get. As far as we can get. This is dangerous for the church. We should stay as far from the line as possible. Point number 2. If you would, here in the book of Job, turn to chapter 28. Job chapter 28. I love the book of Job. Of course, I love all of God's Word. But Job is one of my favorites. And in Job chapter 28 and in verse 28, the last verse of the chapter, and unto man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. That sounds like Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 10. the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it's something, this was written hundreds of years before Proverbs was written. Job already recognized the importance of the fear of the Lord, that it was wisdom. But listen to this last statement in this verse. And to depart from evil is understanding. To depart from evil is understanding. In other words, to judge between truth and lies, good and evil. Many in the church has bought the lie, we cannot and must not judge. And unfortunately, one of the reasons we've bought it is the world, anytime we do judge, we get quoted Matthew 7:1. They may not know another verse in all the Bible, but boy, they know Matthew 7:1. Judge not lest ye be judged. And they say, see, you can't judge. They need to continue reading that chapter. Because Jesus teaches us how to judge in that chapter. If you continue reading, it's important for us in the church to judge. One, we are taught how to judge one another, our brothers and sisters in the Lord. That's what follows immediately next. You know, the beam that's in our own eye, we've got to get out before we can help a brother that's got a mote, a little bitty speck in his own eye. Jesus is teaching us how to judge. We go a little further and we learn about the path that leads to destruction, the path that leads to life, the path that leads, the good path, the right path, the wide and the narrow way. How do we know the difference? We have to judge. Jesus teaches us how to judge the two different ways. You get a little further and you read about the wolves in sheep's clothing and how to judge them, how to spot them, because we can't spot them with our eyes. We can't spot them based on the way they look. They might show up with a nice tie. You can't spot them that way. But Jesus taught us how to spot them by their fruits. In other words, what are they producing? What's being produced? Well, how do you do that? You judge. But we need to be able to judge between truth and lies, good and evil. We live in a world just like is spoken of in Isaiah chapter 5, where they put, you've got, woe to them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. We need to be able to discern. And many in the church today struggle with that. And here's the number one reason they struggle. And look, we can all be deceived. We can all believe a lie. But the more we keep our nose in this book, the less likely we're to be deceived. The less likely we are to believe a lie. We must be able to discern between good and evil. We must be able to judge between lie and truth. We're living in a day and time, I don't believe how is it that Pastor Dean puts it? I don't believe anything I hear and only about half of what I see. The news media lies. I don't care whether you're watching CNN, Fox News, NBC, ABC, CBS. I don't care if it's the national, international news. I don't care if it's the local news. We're being lied to. We were lied to up and down about the coronavirus. Do we need to wear a mask? Oh, if it'd make you feel better. Wear masks. Both can't be true. They either helped or they didn't. Answer, they didn't. Unless you had a mask truly designed for it, it didn't help. It doesn't help. We get lied to Do you believe the news that you get about the Russia and Ukraine war? Do you believe the news you get about global warming? My Bible, at the end of the flood, has God telling Noah and his sons that they would be summer and heat, winter and cold. And yet we hear, here's another one. And this is one of those that perks my ears up. Oh, I trust science. I trust science. Well, science is forever changing. There was a time in this world when the scientists believed the earth was flat. Not the common people, but the scientists believed the earth was flat. Now they tell us it's round. You can pick up a newspaper. Bran's good for you. 5 years later, they'll tell you bran's bad for you. The science changes. We need to discern, and more importantly than the science and the politics and the news, we need to judge the spiritual. We need to be able to see God's truth from Satan's lies. We need to see that. We need to be able to discern that. And by discerning that, we can eschew evil. We can flee. Look, there's fights and battles that's going to come our way we can't escape. We can't get out of the way of. Amen. But there's some we can. There's some fights and some battles. There's some bruises that don't need to happen. There's some scars that can be avoided. But we have to be able to discern, to judge between good and evil. If you would, turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 for the third point. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. First Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 22. Or verse 15, excuse me. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Notice those statements. See that none render evil for evil unto any man. That means any. Saved or lost. We're not to render evil even when they do us terrible injustice, terrible wrong. We're not to return in favor. We're told to follow. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow, ever follow that which is good. What is good? Jesus said there's none good but God. God's Word is good. Follow that which is good, both among yourselves, meaning amongst the church, and to all men. To all men. You know, God gave us the ultimate example of that at the cross. At the cross, God gave us His good for our evil. God gave us His good for our evil. So when we think of the cross and we think of Jesus hanging there naked in front of the world on the cross, shedding His most holy and precious blood, as Pastor Dean would say, He didn't spill His blood, He shed His blood. He shed His blood there for us. And He took our evil, our sin upon Himself and gave us His good. And if you've been born again, if you've been washed in that most holy and precious blood of Jesus Christ, you have received His good. And the thing that is mind-blowing about that is when God looks at Michael Phillips, He doesn't see the evil. And there's much evil there. And it's not that God's blind, because God sees clearly. And what He sees is the blood. He sees the blood of Jesus Christ, the Lamb that taketh away the sin of the world, as He hung there on the cross and bled and suffered and died for us to make this possible. And we think at any point in time that we've got a right to render evil. And that word render means to return, to pay back. To return or to pay back. When Jesus prayed for those that crucified Him, those Roman soldiers, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Just had nailed Him to the cross. Those men, those religious leaders that stood there and cursed Him as He hung there on the cross. And Jesus would have been the first to forgive them if they put their faith in Him, repented of their sins. And those of us that have received that ultimate gift, that gift of God, we have no right to render evil for evil, no matter what gets done. And that's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? Because it's one thing when somebody does something accidentally. It's one thing when somebody does something small and they come to you and say, please forgive me for that. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to forgive. But when somebody does something desperately evil to you, desperately wrong to you, that's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? That's where this high calling of God comes into play. To forgive. Because if we don't forgive, if we just return evil for evil, that just brings more evil. But when we forgive, now look, we can't make anybody do anything. We can't force anybody to behave like we would want them to behave. But we do have power on how we behave. We do have power on how we react. And it's not about feelings. You say, well, I don't feel like forgiving them. That may or may not come. That's not the issue. Forgiveness is an action, it's a choice. And it's a protection against evil. Our last point tonight. Look at verse right here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 22. Abstain from all appearance of evil. Abstain from all appearance of evil. Appearance means apparent likeness. But sometimes appearances can be deceiving, can't they? It's not always what it looks like. And so we Christians, we the church of the living God, we must be very careful not to put ourselves in positions what we are doing could be misconstrued, could be misinterpreted. We've heard Pastor Dean talk about this, and you'll hear us talk about it this evening. You will never, unless it was some life and death emergency situation, you will never find me alone with a woman that's not my wife. You will never find me alone with a woman other than Donna. It will not happen. It's not going to happen. I'm not a Billy Graham fan. But he had a rule that he and the men in his ministry kept. And it was just that. Never to be alone with another woman other than their wife. Ever. Now you might see, if you do see me, it'll be with family. At some point, you might see Delaney riding with me somewhere. But outside of family, you will never, ever see that. Because somebody could say, well, I was riding up the road and I seen Michael driving down the road and there was a woman over there in the passenger seat and it sure weren't Donna. What's going on there? What's going on? The appearance. It's not good enough just to avoid the evil itself. We in the church have to avoid the very appearance of it. We must avoid the very appearance. Because again, it could be misconstrued. Even the appearance of evil can ruin our testimony by ruining our reputations. And then our usefulness to God has been damaged greatly. At that point, all He can use us for is a bad example. You know, I heard somebody, and I can't remember if it was Evangelist Sam Gipp or not, talking about this drunk in this town. And one day this man come up to him in line in the street or a ditch or something and said, "You're not good for anything." And the drunk said, "Oh, yes, I am a bad example." We shouldn't want to be a bad example. We shouldn't want to be used by God as a bad example. So we must be careful. Last place you have to turn tonight as we finish this point tonight, Proverbs chapter 22. Proverbs chapter 22. Let's see what Proverbs chapter 22 has to say about this very subject. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 1. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The first part of that. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. A good name. Capital C, capital H, capital R, capital I, capital S, capital T, I-A-N. We have a good name. We have a good name. We have a good name. Let's not drag God's name through the mud. Let us be careful where we go. Again, as Pastor Dean would say, be careful what these little eyes see. Be careful what these little ears hear. Be careful where these feet, for Him it's not so little, but be careful where these feet lead, where they walk to. Because if we're not careful, that appearance of evil, we must abstain from even the appearance of evil. Again, it's not good enough just to avoid evil or to abstain from evil. It's from the very appearance. If you are lost, how do you deal with evil? And you cannot help but to swim in the evil. There's nothing a lost person can do not to swim in the evil. But there is hope. And His name is Jesus Christ. And His gospel, that He died for our sins. That Jesus Christ was buried, and that on the third day He rose again. That's how the church deals with evil. That's how the church deals with evil. We eschew evil. We flee from it. We concern ourselves with God's name, which is now just like I bear the last name of my daddy, Phillips. And what I do with the rest of my life is going to bear witness or record. Not too many weeks ago, just last month, in fact, somebody asked about a family name and somebody said Phillips. And when the man that had asked the question said, "That's a good name around these parts." Well, Michael Phillips shouldn't do anything to mess that up. Michael Phillips shouldn't do anything to mess that up, but more importantly, we shouldn't do anything to bring evil upon God's name, upon Christ's name. And for those of you that's lost out there, YouTube, Facebook, you hear this, it's simple. God made it so simple. All you have to do is repent, which means to turn from your sin and turn to God, which again is a gift from God, and to put your faith in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And then you too can eschew evil. You too can fear God and eschew evil. You too now have a good name. And that's the good name, the Lord God Jesus Christ, who gave it all so we could be called by His name. And thank the Lord for that.